Hello, I'm Sherry Trenholm, and I was president of the Association of Professional Engineers of New Brunswick in 2001. Before I started with engineering, I did civil engineering technology, and I actually worked for a consulting firm and a past president, Boyd Touchy. And so when he encouraged me to continue my education and go on and get my engineering degree, which I did. And so when I became a member in 1986, I actually started on committees right off the bat. So the employee committee was the first one that I got involved with, and also the local branch in Moncton. In Moncton particularly, the reason I got involved is because when I was going to university, they awarded me the Blackett Scholarship. And at the time, Boyd Touchy was the chair of the committee. Him and Mrs. Blackett took me to lunch. So I always was very appreciative of that extra assistance financially with my university. So I decided to give back to the association, and also the local branch. Well, I started in civil engineering technology, and I did some municipal work over the years as a student, and the last year at the community college I actually did drafting for ADI at the time, and ACI was in Moncton, and from there I got actually more interested in buildings than I did in municipal engineering, and so I decided to further my training. I've always been able to draw, and a lot of my subject matter was buildings, and at one point I actually wanted to become an architect. And midway through my studies with engineering, I even looked at continuing my education as an architect, but was encouraged to stay in engineering, and I am so glad today. And I have the pleasure of working with architects often, so I get the best of both worlds because I'm working with engineers as well as architects. I actually, when I went through, you had to do a 5-year term. So you were 2 years as counselor, basically vice president, president, and past president. So the journey was incredible. In fact, the year I was president, I actually visited 8 provinces. The one I didn't get to was Newfoundland at the time in Atlantic Canada, but I did it the following year just because we had a conflict of schedule, and so my vice president went on the agreement that I would get to do it as past president. So just seeing across the country, opportunity to meet engineers from all across the world in many places in the country, and also find out what they're doing in the different associations was just an incredible experience. We had a very strong year that year. We actually, we had Canada Post had actually identified a star that was in reflection of the Iron Ring. At that time when I was president, we had over 250,000 engineers across the country receive their Iron Ring, and they commemorated it on this dual stamp. And calling of the engineer is what we hear when we're going through the Iron Ring ceremony. So that was pretty special. And for me, the year I was president, I actually spoke at 4 Iron Rings ceremonies, 2 at UNB and 2 at the University of Moncton, and I did one as past president. The one at UNB, the year I was president in April, was one of the largest engineering class of females that had ever graduated from UNB. So, and at the time I was the second female in 82 years to hold office, and the first female of the new association, which was the Association of Professional Engineers and Geoscientists of New Brunswick. So the geoscientists joined us in the month of June of 2001, and we hosted a national meeting for both the Canadian Council of Professional Engineers as well as the professional geoscientists. So people flocked from all over Canada, and people did come from different parts of the world as well. And we had terrific weather. They fell in love with St. Andrews, and that certainly was a highlight for me when I was president. Two things that happened during my term as president, which I'm really proud that I was part of, is we didn't have a full-time communications director prior to me arriving on council. And it was council's wish at the time that we wanted to increase the profile of engineers across the province to the public. We also wanted to encourage more females to get into the profession, and difficult to do that when you don't have to have someone that is on staff as a communication director. So during my term, we did interviews, and we actually hired a communications director who just recently was finished with the association, but has been with us for, I think, close to 18 years. So it made a huge difference in our bulletins that we went out. They used to be black and white with a bit of blue. They tripled and quadrupled in size. Bilingual was added. So really, and we were out as far as advertising in the province much more, and people knew what engineers were doing. In addition to that, during my 5-year period, I actually had 4 executive directors that I worked with. I started on council, and even with my younger committees, I started with Huntley Wishart, was an executive director. Then Eddie Kinley was on council as our executive director during my time as vice president and president, and he had a 5-year contract with us. So we did half of the traveling I did in the earlier part of the year till June. I traveled with Eddie across the country and also hosted the national meeting in St. Andrews. Then Brian Barnes was our interim executive director while we were going out to market to hire another full-time executive director, Andrew McLeod, who's with us today. So I was part of the team that went through the interviewing process, testing, follow-up, and anyways, but I never actually got to work with Andrew McLeod because he came in after my president's term. So I really just dealt with him in my past president's role, which is not quite as active as the president's role. Well, I must say I did have a little bit of fun on council, and so I often traveling from Moncton to council meetings or to annual meetings, I actually got a chance to travel with fellow engineers from the Moncton area, because we'd have a counselor, an incoming counselor, and a counselor that's actually in their 2nd term. So this one particular engineer, he was a mechanical engineer, and so we had actually one of our annual meetings in Edmundston, New-Brunswick. So we left on a very snowy day, because the month of February is often we do have winter weather, and we had a bit of a blizzard in Moncton when we left to travel to Edmundston. So he brought his truck, picked me up at home. We shared the driving, but of course the long journey meant a stop for gas and also washroom facilities. So while he was filling the vehicle full of gas, I went in to use the washroom facilities. But when I came out, he had of course moved the vehicle over out of the gas pump area into a parking spot and went in to use the washroom also. Not paying attention to what type of vehicle, I just knew it was a large truck. I get in the truck, and lo and behold, he comes out and couldn't figure out what happened to me, and then walks over to the truck, knocks on the window, and says, "Sherry, are you really coming with me? Because you're not in the right truck. That's not even the one I own." So it was a good laugh for the rest of the trip to Edmundston, and he still chuckles about that today. And I don't know if I'm much better at picking out vehicles than when I was back then, but I do know quite a bit about buildings, so that's the good news. Our second story that was really quite comical is during my term as president, we had not had a strategic planning session for some time for council, so we actually scheduled that in the fall of the year, and we scheduled it down in Fundy National Park area, so that we could arrive earlier before the session started. Some people took advantage of playing golf, and then we did the strategic planning session at Square Lake. So during my time on council, we had 2 lay councillors, And this particular one, we had a lawyer from the Moncton area who actually arrived late in the evening because he had to appear in court that day. And so he was dressed with a full suit and dress shoes, and so we were more casual dressed. So we had a great evening of socializing, and it's a great way to network, because often when you're in council meetings, you don't have a time to actually get to know your fellow people that are on council on an outside, more casual basis. So wonderful evening. So we were done a little bit late, and so the engineer that I had traveled with up to Edmundston was the same engineer that was actually the roommate to this lawyer, and in fact told him the only way to his cabin was by boat, and it was a little kind of small wooden boat, and he had to get his luggage and everything in the boat. So you'd imagine full suit, dress shoes, and your luggage. And there was quite a challenge getting across because there wasn't a lot of water at that time, and he was scared the boat was going to tip over, so he was quite terrified about the whole evening. Next morning he woke up, and in fact there was a road to the camp, no problem at all. He never had to take the boat, but of course the engineer was having a lot of fun with the lawyer at this point. So anyways, we got a good laugh at that, and we usually talk about that every time we come to the annual meeting, that story, because that's a cute one. I would certainly do it again. It was this term, the 5 years, and the year that I was president was certainly a highlight in my career. I have been involved in a lot of organizations since I was on council with the association, and I do a lot of volunteer work in the community, but there's never been such an extraordinary opportunity to be involved in so many things that were put in place while I was on council, to be part of a communications director, to be hired, and to go see 9 different provinces across the country. That's a chance of a lifetime. And at the same time that I was doing my term as president, one of the things that I was working towards before I even got to the presidency was improving my public speaking. And I joined a group called International Training in Communications. And so I actually was competing in speech contests during my term as president. Started in April, where I drove from St. John, New-Brunswick to Fredericton and completed at council level after being successful at club level. And then from there was successful and went to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and competed, and was the only Canadian out of 9 contestants that actually participated, and was selected the top contestant to go to international level. And the prize for a year was actually a Canada Goose from Alcan Aluminum in Montreal. So, and it had not been in Canada for many years. So in June of that year, during my term, I went to Anaheim, California, and competed internationally amongst people from 12 different countries and made it into the final round. So it gave me the confidence when I went to public speak in different areas across the country. So that helped me be able to tell people about what we did in the association and how our role was in the province of New Brunswick, to the point when I got to Moose Jaw in May of the year I was president, and I publicly spoke at an event to acknowledge, because at that time the presidents always spoke at every annual meeting. The following luncheon the next day when they were giving awards, the mayor of Moose Jaw, who I didn't know at the time was an actual professional engineer, indicated that he wanted to make someone from away an honorary citizen of Moose Jaw. And I was the lady that was selected. So I was quite privileged. So that helped me out a lot during my time. I love helping others, and an engineer has some really special skills when it comes to managing even committees and boards and organizing. We've leadership roles, and of course being on the association, it gave me skill set and leadership roles to be able to do that. So most of these not-for-profit organizations do not have a staff and often do not have volunteers that have understanding of building construction. So for me to be able to volunteer my time to see and help them through the process of design and construction and see the end results, and in each project I've been involved in, it has a huge impact in the community as a whole. The YMCA, which you've got probably close to 7,000 members. The old Y, when I was involved, had around 880 members. So you are helping so many people in the community as a result of your volunteering your time. The YWCA, we now have a long-term stay from 2 to 5 years for young mothers. Prior to that, there was no location for them to live, and they would go short-term or couch to couch. So they never had a chance to actually finish their education, get out in the workforce, learn how to actually look after a child, manage themselves. So there is a place in Moncton now that we offer as a result of it. So it's just the satisfaction you're making a difference and you're giving your time to help others. It's added a big dimension to my life, and I started at the association. So. The challenge is we have a goal to increase number of females that are in the profession. I've been in the profession and been a member of the association since 1986. In the construction industry, in the design offices, there's more females today, but out during construction projects and on the sites, they're not plentiful. That still needs some work to go. There is many meetings that I'm still sitting at that I'm the only female, so there's going to be a lot of effort moving forward. I feel it's strong that we do keep self-regulated. No one knows our profession better than the engineers that are in the province that are working here daily. And so I was a bit surprised that we have had some associations in other provinces not be no longer self-regulated. But I'm hoping that that will not be a trend that will follow across country. But it's to our advantage to be self-regulated, to identify the requirements, identify to government the need, and champion our profession to the general public to make them aware that we are self-regulated. We have procedures in place to make sure that our members are qualified, experienced, and knowledgeable to do the work that they do. And that's critical. So I think it's more, because it's a smaller group, it's designated to our group, it's a more stronger support than having it in a large government regulated environment. Key thing is that whoever is in the role as in the leadership role within council, including the executive director, chief executive director, or the president, it's really important to network with your members within your association across the province and not do it just from Fredericton areas, to make sure that you take the time to go and listen and discuss and talk, but it's equally important to network with people outside of the province, across the country and internationally, because we grow from that. The other thing that I'm hoping in 2050 also, we'll have more diversity. We have a lot of people immigrating into New Brunswick right now. Moncton is very strong in that area, and I'm hoping the mobility for engineers that have got their training outside of the province, the mobility will become easier for them to come into the province to get their license to practice, to be able to do engineering.